Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our series of data-centric AI webinars. I think this is number 14. We're going great guns, so it's lovely to have you with us this afternoon. I'm going to just give a little bit of time to give people the opportunity to join us. Um, Please follow Gianfranco's example and pop in your name and where you're from, whether you want to say which region or country you're from, or what company you work for, or other interests that you have. Very happy for you to do that. So, welcome everybody to the ODI webinar number 14 in our data-centric AI series, The Shifting Landscape of Data-centric AI. So, I'm going to leave it until 2 minutes past, and then we'll make a start. Hello. Yes, we are very warm here in the UK at the moment, countrywide. Good afternoon, Eric. Great to see you. Hi, Gianfranco. Lovely to have you with us. So Tanya, very good to see you too. Welcome, everybody. Right, so I think we will make a start. As I say, welcome to the Data-centric AI webinar number 14, the shifting landscape of data-centric AI, with Professor Eleanor Simple, who is the Director of Research here at the ODI. Now, throughout the session, we're going to be gathering questions up from the chat. So please do feel free. If you have a question for Eleanor, do pop it in the chat. We always like to encourage people to interact in that chat. So, you're more than welcome, obviously, to interact with your fellow attendees, share links. If any references are made during the course of Eleanor's talk, if we don't have the links immediately to hand, we'll make sure that we share them during the course of the webinar. And I must let you know that this is going to be recorded, this webinar, and we will be using the content across the ODI's different social channels. So other bits of housekeeping for you to be aware of. It's possible that we'll use quotes and extracts from the recording, which might include questions or queries from the chat. So we might use that in our future communication. So if you'd rather that we didn't do that with anything that you pop in the chat, please let us know. And our team is also on the chat as well. So if you need anything or anything is not working for you, if you could please pop something into the chat, and Joe will be there to help you out with that. So on to today's topic. And the subject today is the shifting landscape of data-centric AI, making sense of the hype and always coming back to what it means for all of us living through these very intense and changing times. And as I say, delighted to be joined by my colleague, Professor Eleanor Simperl, the ODI's Director of Research and the co-director of the King's Institute for Artificial Intelligence. Eleanor is one of the UK's leading voices on building data-centric AI that works for everyone. She's going to take us through a few key themes that are especially pertinent at the moment. And then we're going to get into a conversation, a bit of a fireside chat, but with plenty of room for your questions as well in the audience. So, Eleanor, over to you.
Thank you, Emma, and welcome everyone. It's an honor to see so many of you joining us on a sunny afternoon, at least in London. For the next 15 to 20 minutes or so, I'm going to share some reflections on what we at the ODI, what I as an AI scientist observe and reflect on in the AI ecosystem. The Data-centric AI program, which I set up at the ODI more than 2 years ago, started with this realization, and which by now has become a very powerful a statement that without data there is no AI. And by that we mean that without access to high quality, well governed data, we wouldn't be able to have trained the foundational AI capabilities that fuel many AI products, including consumer products like chatbots, but also AI systems and innovations in many other areas, from science to education and public services. Um, Over the last 2.5 years, we have explored and contributed to building a stronger public data infrastructure for AI, because we know from our own work and collaborating with our partners that without a strong public data infrastructure, we wouldn't be able to have useful, fair, AI enabled public services that many governments in this country and elsewhere are piloting. We would have less reliable and trusted online information services that an increasing share of the public are using. And we would have a smaller and perhaps less equitable AI economy. We at the ODI remain convinced that building this infrastructure on open foundations, and by that we mean open data that is essential to boost innovation, open standards, open approaches, open innovation, is what allows this country, as well as like-minded governments around the world, to grow a healthy AI economy that benefits everyone. So against this background, on the next slide, I've summarized some of the work that the ODI has been leading on over the past 18 months or so. I'm not going to dwell too much into any of these topics, because we did have a series of previous webinars in the Data-centric AI series that has discussed them. But I hope this slide gives you an idea of how the ODI is contributing to building those strong foundations of public data infrastructure, whether that's through creating nationwide data assets like our National Data Library Light prototype, which is an AI machine learning data set, as well as an AI agent and other tooling required to be able to use that data, whether it's so-called open benchmarks, say shared resources that allow everyone to have a better understanding and build an evidence base for how well AI technology could work in public services, whether that's frameworks to structure and inform our conversations about AI-ready data, or contributions to community-built open source data infrastructure, including metadata vocabularies and tools, or data portals, open source data portals that are now building more and more AI native features, or data standards like on the left-hand side, volunteering, a data standard for publishing and exchanging volunteering data, which we are stewarding and designing from the ground up with various stakeholders in a way that makes it not just a useful resource to share data, but also in a way that is future-proof for AI applications. If you want to know more about any of these different projects, you can find them on the Data-centric AI website at the ODI, and I'm sure colleagues can also share the relevant links. Now let's look into that shifting landscape that we were talking about at the beginning of the webinar. If we go to the next slide, a while ago, February 2025, we've published a taxonomy of data involved in developing, using, and monitoring AI systems. And we did that because we felt there is need for more clarity and a more informed, grounded discussion about data and AI. As we are now seeing more and more types of systems being developed, AI applications in public services, science, many other societally relevant areas, as well as the rise of so-called agentic AI. There's new species of data we need to be concerned with. Not just prompts, which is the main way in which most of us, as well as computer programs and agents, interact with large language models, but also context data. So what we are sharing with AI to get better results. We have more and more systems being used, and with that, a need to manage, steward, and analyze deployment logs and to monitor for specific behaviors or risks. As more and more agents, AI agents are being built, so-called agentic metadata becomes more important to analyze and optimize the performance of these agents. That includes reasoning trails to understand how an agent has come to a certain decision or an action. It may include traces of the types of tools that have been used, for instance, for compliance or performance management purposes, or so-called memory, agentic memory, which again is a form of context that allows the agent to remember what a user has shared with them. There's more and more calls for independent evaluations and audits, like the ones we've been doing at the ODI in the area of citizen queries, as well as an increased awareness of potential incidents and a larger number of incident databases and incidents reported in these crowdsourced resources. So all these types of data are extremely important to grow a healthy, trustworthy AI economy. And to do that, we need new forms of trusted data intermediaries. We need to think about what portability, interoperability means for these types of data and the way they are managed. And we need to have open source tools, software, capabilities to be able to use them, not just proprietary ones. If we move on to the next slide, AI has considerably diminished the cost of content generation. At the same time, it has exponentially raised the cost of trusting that content. While global studies of attitudes towards AI seem to suggest that people trust chatbot advice much more than many other established institutions. Establishing trust is that trust and managing it is absolutely essential for anyone who is thinking about deploying AI in a certain customer-facing context. And for that, the technical means to do that rely on metadata, which is something that we at the ODI and the wider community has been working with data and data ecosystems now a lot But for people working perhaps in the machine learning community in areas where a scale and volume of data can achieve a lot is becoming increasingly visible. So we hear more and more vendors, AI vendors, and teams who are building AI products talking about well-governed data, technical governance, including technical governance with metadata. Because it's not just a matter of reducing the costs of deploying this technology, it's also helpful for improving information retrieval, for grounding answers, to increase their accuracy. Without metadata, you cannot do much towards data provenance and to document the authenticity of content. It has a huge role in the quality of the training data, which impacts performance. And then with the US, the EU, China, many other countries looking at codes of practice and voluntary schemes to encourage responsible AI, there's also a role for metadata in accountability. Metadata management is an under-glamorized topic, and we know that historically it has taken a lot of time and resources to do right. And we see more and more solutions that are based on AI itself, on the same types of our algorithms and capabilities, to make these processes more scalable and less resource intensive, which is good news. We're moving on to the next slide. So we've spoken about new emerging forms of data. We've spoken about the role of metadata. Very related to metadata is our knowledge graphs, which are ways to structure information about a domain or about a process or workflow organization in a structured, curated, machine understandable way. Alongside the growing importance of metadata, we see an increased role of knowledge graphs as foundations of AI data governance. Because knowledge graphs and the ontologies that or vocabularies that are used to structure their information allows one to share semantics across different data platforms. They help with establishing the lineage and the provenance of information, of answers, of data. Because knowledge graphs sometimes contain background knowledge about a domain, so a knowledge base of a certain domain or the way a certain organization works, they are very, very useful in generating explanations alongside, for instance, reasoning trails in agents. And they can also help with data access rules and policies in a very, very granular way. And the good news is that there are already a whole range of enterprise data management solutions with these types of knowledge graph capabilities built in. And there's many open source knowledge graphs as well as vocabularies and ontologies that one could use. If we're moving to the next slide. At the ODI, we've been speaking for a long time about AI-ready data. We have published and several versions of our AI-ready framework, which allows us to assess existing data infrastructure, data use cases, and to provide practical recommendations to make that data that an organization holds or a government publishes even more valuable and more useful in AI use cases. What is happening right now with the rise of agentic AI is that that data needs to be acted on by computer programs that take decisions autonomously. So on the right-hand side, you see an overview of our AI-ready data with 4 dimensions related to the data itself. Its metadata, the surrounding infrastructure, as well as data governance. All that allows an AI developer to use that data more effectively with less friction. But essentially, that data is read, is consumed for these purposes. If we're now talking about AI agents interacting with data, agent ready in this context means that data is not just read, but data can also be updated or written. It needs to be trusted, otherwise an AI agent perhaps would not consider that data or that evidence in their actions and decisions, and it needs to be acted on. So you could imagine that everything that I've said about the increasing role of metadata will apply to even more so to agentic scenarios. And I think on the next slide, if I remember, I have a few more considerations about what agent ready data would mean more specifically. We would go to the next slide, please. So what types of requirements do we have then on data and metadata in agentic context? Well, everything that I have said before, but considering the fact that we are dealing with autonomous computer programs that will most likely act in a risk-averse way, and really require curated, high-quality ways to assess whether a source of information, a data set in this case, is useful for them or not. So that means even more machine actionable, navigable structures for that data. So like we said in our AI ready framework, that means shared identifiers, granular types, schemas, and APIs. It means even more granular permissions and guardrails available in a machine readable way so that policies can be automatically executed, as well as detailed usage information that an agent could consume. It means provenance lineage and also reversibility, so the ability to revert a certain data action. And for that, you need audit trails, you need tighter version control, as well as transactional semantics. We need data in real time. So for that, we need timestamps, we need change management and version control, as well as that deep semantic context that knowledge graphs provide to give more confidence in decisions. If we're moving to the next slide. So we've spoken so far about infrastructure. What I haven't really spoken about is new data. So with large language models and foundational models, we were in a situation where all of AI vendors had and developers had access to the web, to a huge publicly available resource that allowed everyone with the right compute investment to train these amazing capabilities. As we see new forms of AI systems emerging, and particularly in the physical world, we don't have an equivalent data commons to foster that innovation. So if we're thinking about science lab, autonomous labs, if we're thinking about robotics, if we're thinking about autonomous vehicles, that data is not available. And it is, of course, great to see initiatives in the UK supporting the generation of new data assets, like in the case of the Sovereign AI Fund, or with our research councils and Innovate UK. But even if you're looking at those types of initiatives, we still notice that unfortunately, questions around sharing and using that data asset across the ecosystem, as well as questions around how that data would be maintained and updated, are not as prominent as they could be. With these new types of data commons that this country has not yet built, we see also opportunities to do things right from the start in terms of equitable data stewardship and governance to create that healthy economy and ecosystem that allows and fosters smaller players as well to thrive. And I think I'm coming to close with the different trends. So if we're moving to the next slide. So one of our co-founders said about the web, this is for everyone. And we do strongly believe that the same principle applies to public data infrastructure for AI as well. One of the projects we've been most excited about recently is our work in benchmarking existing large language models in answering accurately, truthfully, and to the point a wide range of citizen queries that the UK public may have. We have built this benchmark in a standardized way that AI engineers resort to. What we'd like to do next is to think about participatory approaches to do this. And recently, I've been very inspired by a project called Community Models, run by the Collective Intelligence Project, which essentially create a platform for people with or without a technical background, with a certain interest in an AI system or deployment, to be able to have more of a say, not just in how we collect a data set or create or steward a benchmark data set, but also how we define and assess performance. I've already spoken about the importance of new data commons that we're lacking for other types of AI systems, specifically in the physical world. What we also need to think about is that some of these data commons will not be publicly available because they contain very sensitive data. So then if we're thinking about those types of contexts, we equally need openly available, well-tested, safe environments to share that type of data, to allow people to engage in AI evaluations of different types of systems, even when these contain very sensitive information. And finally, the UK has pioneered transparency mechanisms in the use of digital technologies in the public sector. There is a lot more to be done to make sure that when AI is used in public services, we have a very good understanding of this use, of its performance, and the various limitations and outcomes. So something along the lines of a mandatory reporting that is ensuring safety in other areas like pharmaceuticals or aviation that come with similar safety concerns should apply as well to AI tools that decide who gets cancer treatment or whose benefits are going to be lifted. Say there is a role there for organizations like us, as well as other stakeholders across the AI ecosystem, to design those types of reporting mechanisms together. And I think with that, I would say thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share some of these thoughts. And I'm very much looking forward to discussing them with you today or after the webinar.
Amazing, Eleanor. Thank you so much. And if I could just ask our colleague Joe Healy, who is managing the whole webinar actually, but specifically the tech, if Joe, you could just pop into the chat the link to the Data-centric AI program page on the ODI website, that would be hugely appreciated if anybody wants to read more deeply into any of the topics that Eleanor's just covered. So that was quite a whistle-stop tour through an awful lot of material. Have you got a fly?
There's no
Oh,
light.
it's the lights. Okay, we can see
Yes.
you now. So you walked us through a lot. If you had to name one thing in the public discourse, I guess, around AI, and I guess specifically for our purposes about the data that is feeding AI. If there's one thing that is going wrong, that isn't being kind of considered correctly within that public discourse, what would it be from your point of view?
I mean, there's a lot going on, right? So I think the conversation, the general discourse is still quite polarized. We still have um, techno optimists who are telling us that AI is going to reach artificial general intelligence, maybe even replace us and take our jobs. But who cares? Because we would have made this amazing um, technological achievement and maybe managed to achieve some scientific breakthroughs along the way as well. On the other hand, you have um, people who are worried or perhaps overly pessimistic about innovation. Now, if we're putting that aside, um, for me, the one conversation that we need to have more is how do we actually know if those capabilities deliver? So if we're using AI in the public services, as I think we should try to do we know it is working?
Mm.
And who decides how we establish that? And what happens when a technology or a product that was rolled out does not deliver or stops delivering along the way?
Hmm.
Um, so the whole conversation about what is the performance, the use, and the impact of AI, and that applies to public services, and it also applies to various other areas like rolling out AI in an organization, and it requires shared common data.
Hmm.
And by that, I mean standardized data to test performance, standardized metrics to for everyone to understand what exactly are we monitoring and how, and standards to be able to share that information
Hmm.
to see whether some of the limitations perhaps that we are seeing are due to um, principal issues with technology or whether they are related to perhaps the specific use case or deployment.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, I think that the interesting point, just to pick up on this issue of how do we know when they are and they aren't performing? Well, I mean, sometimes we know because there's a scandal when they don't perform.
Yeah,
When algorithmic decision making goes wrong, whether the fault is in the data or the fault is in the algorithm, it's usually a very public um,
yeah, yeah,
outcome.
yeah, yeah,
And then that you made the point, you were talking about trust at one point in your presentation, and that that's a major issue, isn't it? People have to be able to trust that they're getting the right information, that the right decisions are being made about them and their families and finances and whatever it happens to be. Um, so the stakes are quite high, I think, is what I'm getting
yeah.
at.
Yeah, the stakes are quite high. I think the issue of trust is really really important. There's it's highly contextual trust. So I was referring. Why do people trust LLMs more than other entities? Do you think? Thank you, Jessica. Exactly. So on last week, I was listening to a presentation about a global survey of attitudes towards AI. It's based, I think, on 200,000 people. It's called Global Dialogues.
Hmm.
And one of the things they were saying is that that LLMs are trusted more than many established institutions. I think there were two categories that were more trusted. One being family doctors, and the other one I don't remember exactly, but also some type of institution that had been around for a really 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 long time. Um, I mean, there's the jury's still out why this happens. I think the capabilities of large language models and their ability to compress information, to understand what you're asking them to do most of the time is is quite is quite impressive.
Mm,
The ability to react to what you say, you have to understand that, we have to remember that for many decades, this type of capabilities were only accessible through computer code.
hmm
So only to engineers, or technical people who were trained to um, install and configure and use these systems, and everyone else was just being told, they don't understand, maybe. So all IT scandals in the history of the world, or the Western world, in the last decades, essentially tell you, well, people trusted these algorithms, these machines. Some mistakes were made. Some of these mistakes were due to human error, but they were also due to the fact that the the access, to these systems was limited to people who had
mm,
certain skills, right? And now all of a sudden you can talk to your machine in your language at any point in day or night, ask it a question and it will reply. And
mm,
many times it will say meaningful things. Sometimes it could be very generic. Sometimes it could refuse to answer certain types of questions. But I think each of us has made at least one experience where something that was relatively complex, or at least tedious to do,
mm,
was approached reasonably convincing by one of these tools, and then you develop trust.
mm.
Um, it's as opposed to,
Well, they speak with
trusting.
authority.
Yeah,
They seem to
exactly.
speak with authority. I think
Yeah,
that's the crux of it, isn't it? However, what I would say, there's quite a lot of evidence that to show statistical evidence that people, while they might trust LLMs, they also believe that the benefits of AI are going to flow not to them, but to the large tech platforms.
that's
That
true.
there will be an asymmetry in who
Yeah,
benefits from
yeah,
this
yeah.
technology.
And this is, I think, say we've done at King's, so the King's Institute of AI, we've done some work recently with our policy institute, and surveyed a representative sample of the UK population, including young people who go to university, and employers. And this was one of the things most people agreed on, that
Mm,
benefits, they do not think that benefits will be equally distributed. So if we're while people are increasingly using this consumer facing AI, they also have very clear views about who benefits from them, and this is a problem. This is a problem, especially if you're thinking about other uses of AI, um, public services, other types of capabilities, and that or people need on a day by day basis to go about their life, and educate their kids, and deliver at work, and those tools would not be as helpful.
mm,
So the other interesting finding. I mean, we have many interesting findings, by the way, but
mm,
one of the findings that stayed with me from this public attitude survey was the fact that there was a big discrepancy when it came to usefulness and productivity advantages of AI in the workplace, with a large share of workers stating that their job hasn't changed that much, and they actually don't see that many improvements. So if we're moving away from consumer AI, from chatbots, to all these different areas in which AI could and should make a difference, if those AI products are not trusted, then we would have missed an opportunity, and people will potentially be more reluctant to engage with technology more widely.
Absolutely. And I think that the data piece in there is really interesting. And I do want to come back to those points about public sector data and also the public sector data infrastructure as well. So just part that for a second because we've had two questions in the chat. And I think you almost partially answered one because you segued into talking about the attitudes, the King's survey. But Elizabeth's asking whether the ODI is exploring or embedding public views into the data-centric AI work that we're doing. Um, are we leading on anything in that domain? And then we've got Zatanya who is saying she's talking more about participatory and community-based approaches. And I know that you mentioned our desire to do more
Yeah,
participatory work
yeah,
around this in future. So I wonder if you can take those two
yeah.
questions.
So the I think the thank you, Elizabeth and Zoltania for your questions. Um, there is already some very um, rich work on public attitudes towards AI in general in the UK. That is done by in a survey that has been run for several years now by the Ada Lovelace Institute, I think in collaboration with the Alan Turing Institute as well. So I would very much encourage you to have a look because it basically shows just that people have nuanced views and pragmatic attitudes towards AI use. Um, at the ODI, we are working in a project based way. So we're very much led by engagements with specific organizations like local authorities, governments, the private sector, and in those cases, to deliver and achieve impact, we work through participatory design and stakeholder engagement. Doing the public attitudes piece and translating those trends into requirements to design a data standard, or a metadata vocabulary, or a new data set that the ecosystem could use to boost innovation, reduce costs of setting up new businesses, new products and services would be quite difficult. Though we are very much informed by what the colleagues at Ada and the Turing are doing.
Excellent.
If I could just take a second to also answer the second question about participatory community-based approaches. How might these address well-known exclusion AI and data harms? Yes, so this is also based on a research project I'm running with my team at King's College in a project called FOAM, Participatory Auditing and Workbenches for AI. The main challenge we're trying to solve is, well, actually, we're trying to solve many challenges, but one specific challenge is the gap that we have at the moment in the way in which AI capabilities are assessed, and the performance of these and behavior of these systems in the real world. And there's two types of assessments that tend to happen. One is very much a technical assessment that is where the performance of an AI product is measured on a number of test cases that are quite artificially built and do not resemble much real world conditions. And the way performance is defined is also difficult to understand and relate to by a business team or a public interacting with perhaps an AI enabled public service. So that measurement gap needs to be fixed. And the way to do this is to engage with stakeholders more widely and think about ways in which one could define the desired properties and behaviors of a system. One thing that is technologically challenging there is how do you react and how do you fix, how do you mitigate some of the issues that you respond, because the technology has certain limitations, or that the foundational technology has certain limitations when it comes to our ability to be able to fix perhaps an incorrect answer, or a wrong reference.
Excellent, thank you. And I mean, I guess speaking as somebody who's not a technician or a computer scientist, um, all of those interactions with the public sector, with the state, are generating data in of themselves. So there's a feedback loop almost built into
Yeah,
the process, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's there a distinction that we need to make between the um, large language models, which are the technology that is fueling different types of products, and then products or applications, right? So a
Hmm.
chatbot can be using many different types of large language models, and there's a lot that can be done in the design of that product to facilitate a better experience, or introduce guardrails, or make that raw model, AI model, behave in a certain way. And it's the same with public services as well. So the technology is there. We know it has limitations. For instance, it does not speak all languages as
Mm.
fluently. It does not have access to authoritative data on every single topic. It is not always very good at abstaining from providing an answer, generating an answer. Or it may also have a tendency to um, answer questions in the way that it feels most helpful, which may reinforce certain biases, and so on and so forth. You know? There's also a whole range of risks that are understudied for specific use cases, right? So in the work on citizen queries, I mean, if you can imagine every single type of question that someone living in the UK would have from their government, from their local authority. Some of them are time sensitive. Some of them contain a lot of personal information, and we know from research that people tend to, because they trust these systems, they share, and because they are anonymous, right? So they share a lot of information with them. So that question of what is the acceptable level of service of
Mm.
in these situations to mitigate risks and harms is quite important. I think the other interesting thing for me is also, if we're thinking not just about a chatbot style of public service, so returning information, but also perhaps agents that would interact with local authorities and fill out
Hmm.
forms and essentially act on in a delegated way on behalf of the citizen, then much more needs to be changed in the delivery model, because on the one hand, an agent can be quite empowering, especially for people who perhaps don't speak the language very well, or aren't always very aware of the different types of rights they have, and haven't engaged with digital services in the same way. So that's great that more people would have access to that. But at the same time, that creates a challenge at the point of delivery.
Hmm. It's interesting because in the course of that response, you touched on bias a couple of times, and actually Norpel has put into the chat a point that he's making and a question. There are already laws that mandate government to publish audits of AI bias in sensitive uses like welfare assessments. How best can we pressure government to stop resisting calls to involve external auditors in this?
So that's not an area I'm very familiar with, but from say there's many ways to assess biases in AI, and in my experience, one needs to be very careful and very diligent in documenting them to make sure that we understand what the art of the possible is from a technical point of view, or given the data that that system is using, which comes with its own limitations, and then the means we have at our disposal to perhaps mitigate some of those biases. Um, there is a role for independent audits, but of course, on a case by case basis, I can infer from Nobel's question that there's aspects there that I perhaps am less familiar with.
Mm. I've actually got a question about bias, which is slightly different, and this came through in your King's research, actually, in this gulf between how men and women perceive AI.
Right.
And I was thinking about this, and is this so maybe again this is getting more into psychology and behavioral science, but I wonder how much of that could potentially be down to the interactions that individuals have with AI agents. And and those interactions, of course, are based on the data
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
LLMs are
Yeah.
using.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much of it is because um, AIs don't speak quite as well to female gendered people as they do to male gendered people, for example.
Yeah, so this may just as well be the case. What I would say is that we do not have very reliable methodologies to do this, right? So it's quite hard to um, make sure that when you ask even the same person, when you ask one of these tools to give you an answer to a certain question, that the answer will always be the same. Yeah, if you
Hmm.
want that type of reliability, then it's best to use other types of information architectures. That aside, um, there we know that there are biases in the data, and there are studies that have been going on for a really long time that show, for instance, in recommender systems, that for certain types of professions, an AI would make certain types of suggestions that um, point to the fact that in the data those professions were associated with certain genders, or they would make certain statements depending on the assumed nationality of a person with a given name, and so on and so forth. So those things exist. There are some ways to mitigate against it. Um, but at the same time, there's also principal limitations in the way these systems are built. And that's why it's really important to have those extensive audits and reports.
We've had a comment, and I've been listening intently to you, so I haven't had a chance to read this all the way through. But Helen is saying that many people trust chatbots and put lots of personal information in, and that presents data protection and ethical challenges. But in other contexts, people may be reticent to submit information. For example, if a session with a caseworker has been transcribed using an AI tool, and the client might be less open and honest because they are being recorded and or because they don't trust the tool,
Yeah,
which is also a problem.
yeah,
So it's this is the interesting thing about human beings
yeah.
again, and their
It's
data and who they will and won't give their data to, and under what
absolutely,
conditions.
absolutely, because of course no one wants a social care worker to spend time typing their notes. So then the question is, how does one um, build trustworthy products? We know that people um, implicitly, for all sorts of reasons, tend to trust some of the online services, on the online chatbots that they are using on a daily basis. That trust does not seem to extend to AI products that are
Mm.
um, provided by a wider range of vendors. Having said that, I think there's some very good research, I think, on transcription tools and social care, also from the Ada Lovelace Institute again, which has looked into that. But it's a question, really, for me. It's also a question of how do we communicate what AI is. I mean, there's AI buttons in almost every product, in almost every interaction. People are not asked whether they want to have those interactions with or without AI. Those capabilities and features seem to be bolt on everything we're doing these days. And I think that sense of individual agency matters.
Absolutely. We're coming very close to the end of our time, and I don't want us to kind of crash up against a wall. But we've talked a lot in very general terms and quite a bit specifically about public services and sort of the delivery of frontline services, I guess, by using AI and chatbots and whatnot. And actually, it's very hard to see how a government can run a country in the modern age without efficiently without the use of these tools. Um, but I wonder what you think needs to happen in order to, particularly in the UK, I'm thinking of here now, in order for that kind of promise to be realised. Because we've heard a lot of big claims about the potential of AI to revolutionize public services, to make things more efficient, to make the money go further,
Mm.
to make people's lives better. And we know a lot of work is taking place. So I don't want to do
Mm.
anyone in government a
Yeah,
disservice because we know a lot of work is happening. But I wonder what you think what is the thing that's missing or needs to be addressed in order to really accelerate this potential,
yeah.
for us to be a truly sort of AI enabled, data enabled nation.
Okay. Say from the top of my head, um, I will say AI ready government data. Whether that's open government data or data that is shared in a trusted environment, um, that is not going to be your current set of spreadsheets, CSV files, or PDF. So there is work that needs to go into that data infrastructure to be able to build services with less friction. Um, Standards would be the second thing, because it would allow that AI-enabled public services economy to flourish, and it would allow more companies to build offerings to support government in implementing these types of projects. Um, Related to that, also clear ways to assess and monitor performance and risks. And finally, I would say, I think we have an opportunity, because things are being disrupted by AI in all sorts of ways, to rethink about what we want these services to be. So
Mm.
rather than think about, here's a public service, or just about, and how do I use AI to do less data entry and minutes writing, um, is this an opportunity to actually think about the design of that service in a different way?
And I think that's excellent place to conclude for today, Eleanor. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. So we are at time. Thank you so much to Eleanor Simpel for this excellent presentation and for responding so well to all the questions, both mine and those from the audience. Everybody in the audience, please do remember to sign up for our research team newsletter. come to the ODI website, sign up for more of our webinars. We'd love to see you here again moving forward. So to everyone, wish you a very good evening. Enjoy the sunshine. Don't be too hot. Keep hydrated, and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye. Thank you.